So I've recently been spending quite a bit of time looking at different speed picking techniques and trying to find something that will improve my playing. So the three things that I'm looking at are downward pick slanting, upward pick slanting, and cross picking or just flat picking. So from the things that I've been playing, practicing and looking at, I've noticed that all of them have got some benefits, but they've always also got some cons as well, so some pros and some cons. So I thought I would just walk through each of these techniques in a little bit of detail and explain what I think the pros and the cons are, and just see if that helps any of you with your playing. So before I get into the actual picking techniques, there's a couple of other things that I wanted to look at and talk about because they would affect how you pick and how you play. So the first one is the type of bridge that you use. So on this Yamaha, as you can see, the strings are very parallel to the body. Okay, so the bridge is here, the end of the fretboard is there, and it's just a parallel line, and this can make it very easy, or a lot easier to play than other type of bridges. So as you can see on my Les Paul, it's a very different type of angle on the strings. So here's the fretboard, here's the bridge, and the strings come up at an angle. Now if you're not used to that, that can make it more tricky to pick fast. Obviously if you're used to that and that's the type of bridge that you like, then you may find it absolutely fine. But there is a difference, and it does feel very different when playing this type of bridge to a flat bridge. So if you're struggling, maybe try a different guitar or a different type of bridge. So the next thing I want to talk about is wrist angle. So on your wrist, if you just put your wrist as if you're going to start picking, it will fall into a natural position. However, what I found with certain types of these techniques is that twisting your wrist a little bit so it's more flat or straight here rather than just relaxed there, although you do want your wrist to be relaxed all the time, just changing the angle slightly does help sometimes with some of these techniques. And also, as well as that, if your wrist is up a little bit, that will help with, for example, downwards pick slanting. So it's hard to sort of show, but your wrist is going to be more angled like that, so rather than flat, it's going to be more angled and bent at the wrist here. And the last thing I want to talk about is pick, the way you hold your pick. So for example, upwards pick slanting and downward pick slanting, you're going to have a different angle. So for downward pick slanting, your pick's going to be this kind of angle. For upwards, it's going to be this kind of angle. Okay, for flat, it's obviously flat. However, what you'll find is that if you put a little bit more pressure on your thumb on this end of the pick, you will naturally get an angle. And likewise, if you move the pressure of your thumb towards the tip of the pick, you'll get a downwards or an upwards angle. So if I do that without the pick, okay, so I'm not moving the thumb, the center is staying exactly where it is, it's just the angle, the pressure and where that movement is. So you may find, if you're trying downwards pick slanting and getting the angle right, that just tilting your thumb will give you more of an angle. So for example, and with upwards pick slanting, just tilting your thumb towards the tip of the pick will naturally tilt the pick. Okay, so that's just a couple of little tips. So wrist angle in terms of flat, bent there, wrist angle in terms of whether it's flat or bent that way, and how you're tilting your thumb to control the pick. So now we've looked at that, let's look at the three different types of picking and the pros and cons. So as I say, we're going to look at downward pick slanting. So downward pick slanting is the pick is tilted down. And when I say down, I'm talking about the back of the pick, the fat bit of the pick is tilted down. So the tip of the pick is actually tilted up. Okay, so you've got flat, tilted down, and tilted up. So the benefits of this, if we pick an even number of notes on a string, okay, your pick is automatically high and ready to come down onto the next string. Okay, if you're picking flat, you have to then come over the next string. So this is really beneficial for playing faster because you're automatically already in a position to play the next string. Okay, so what are the downside of this is if you're picking an odd number of notes. You've got to do the same thing, you've got to come back over to hit the next string. Whereas if you're picking an even number, you're automatically ready into the next string. Whereas it's harder if you're picking an odd number of notes. So another thing that downward pick slanting is really good for is playing metal. So if you're playing it's really good for playing accurately 4 notes per beat, or 8 or whatever, or 2. So if you're moving across the strings, because you've got that pick slant, it makes it very easy to move down the strings and up the strings. So that is another thing that this is really good for, and it's probably the fastest for using on even numbers across strings. So to summarize, downward pick slanting is really good for playing fast, it's really good for playing an even number of strokes per string, and it's really good for crossing strings as long as you're playing even numbers on each string. The cons are muting is a bit more difficult, so muting the strings that you're not playing is a bit more difficult because of the angle of your hand. It makes odd numbers of notes per string a little bit more difficult, and it can feel a bit awkward at first until you've practiced it. So now let's have a look at the next technique. So next we're going to look at upward pick slanting. So upward pick slanting, as you can probably imagine, is the opposite. So downward pick slanting, you're tilting your hand downwards. Upwards pick slanting, you're tilting your hand up, so the pick is actually pointing more towards the floor. Okay, so again, this one is really good for playing fast. You'll probably notice on this I'm starting with an upstroke, because on downward pick slanting you're playing down on each string. On upwards pick slanting you're picking and you're going to play an upstroke as you come across the strings. So again, as you can see, you're hitting the next string with an up. And on downward pick slanting, and again slowly, you're playing a downstroke as you move across the strings. So on upward pick slanting, I would also, if I'm coming from the bottom strings to the top strings, I would also use an upstroke first. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing, I'm starting with an upstroke. And this is basically the exact opposite in terms of angle to a downward pick slant. So when I'm playing, if I just play regular with the string or with the pick flat, okay, it makes no difference whether I'm playing an up or a down. But on this type of picking, the pick is now here. I've hit that note and the pick is ready to play an upstroke. And the same as if I'm coming backwards. So you're starting with an upstroke on this, and again, it's really good for crossing strings, backwards and forwards, but as long as there's an even number of notes per string. Again, you'll struggle when you've got 3 notes, because now the pick is here, and it's at an angle. So, again, even numbers are best for this type of technique. So, one of the pros of this technique is it feels a lot more natural, because your hand is literally just in this position. I haven't got to twist it upwards like you do with downwards pick slanting. So one of the cons again of this technique is if you've got an odd number of notes per string, or because sometimes you'll play an even number and an odd number within the same scale. For example, this would be a difficult technique to use in that sort of scenario. So to summarize the pros and cons of upward pick slanting. So the pros are it's fast, it's very good for an even number of strokes per string, it's really good for string crossing, and as long as the notes are an even number per string, and you need to start on an upstroke to get the true benefit of this, whereas on a downward pick slanting you'd start on a downstroke. The cons are again difficult when you're playing an odd number of notes per string. String muting is actually a little bit easier on this than it is with upward pick slanting. Well, at least I find it is anyway, and that's probably because it's just a more natural position for your hand, and you can just literally put your hand there and it's automatically pointing down, whereas I have to try a little bit harder when I'm using downward pick slanting. So those are the pros and cons of upward pick slanting. And finally, we're going to look at regular or just flat picking. So we're not emphasizing the downstroke or the downward slant, and we're not emphasizing the upward slant. We're just playing pretty flat. So to me, this is where I naturally play. I have to really concentrate on the other two, and the reason that I do that is because I like to have a bit more versatility in terms of being able to play different numbers of notes per string, and I don't want to have to concentrate too hard on playing the same number of notes per string. So this also feels very natural, and it's where I naturally play. And one of the other things I like about this is I find it easier to mute the strings in this position, because I think it's more natural to me. Obviously other people will have different natural feels, so they will play differently, but I find this more natural for me, and I don't have to concentrate on having my hand at a certain position or my wrist at a position or thinking about it. I can just literally pick up and play. I know that that also comes from years of practice, so if you've been practicing downward pick slanting or upward pick slanting for years, that will be natural to you. So I am trying to break my habits and combine some of these techniques. So to summarize the pros of this technique, it's good for odd and even numbers, it feels natural, and it's easier for string muting. One of the cons, it's not as fast and it requires more work when changing strings. So with the pick slanting downwards, you're automatically ready to play the next string. On this technique, if you see there, I'm stuck in between the E and the B. You have to almost do a little miniature jump to get over that string. So that is what I feel are the pros and cons of that technique. So let's now look at combining the techniques. So a good way to practice these techniques and see which ones feel right to you, and try different wrist positions and different picking pattern positions and different pick grips and stuff like that, is to try the pentatonic scale and the blues scale. And the pentatonic scale, because it's got 2 notes per string, so it should be easy for you to practice the upward pick slanting and downward pick slanting. And the blues scale, because it's got some 3 note per string patterns in it, so it will make you think about how you attack that. So if you don't know the pentatonic scale, it's 12 to 15 on the bottom string, 12 to 14 on the A string, 12 to 14 on the D string, 12 to 14 on the G string, 12 to 15 on the B, and 12 to 15 on the E. And if you don't know the blues scale, again, it's 12 to 15 on the bottom string, 12, 13, 14 on the A, 12 to 14 on the D, 12, 14, 15 on the G, 12 to 15 on the B, and 12 to 15 on the E. Okay, so let's try picking, and we're just going to do this slowly. We're going to try downward pick slanting, and we're going to try the pentatonic. And now back up. Now using the same technique, we're going to play the blues scale. Notice how it feels different when you're coming across the 3 strings, or 3 notes per string, and going back down. Now we're going to do the same thing again, but we're going to use the upward pick slanting. So you'll find that playing the regular pentatonic scale feels quite natural. When you get to the 3 note per string pattern, it's going to throw you out a little bit. Okay, so you can still do it, but it does feel a little bit more awkward. So have a go at both of those and see how you get on. And now with just regular flat picking or cross picking. So with the pentatonic, feels quite natural. And then for the blues scale, you'll find that that feels a little bit more consistent in terms of the ease at which you can play the 3 note per string patterns. So there's nothing wrong with combining the patterns and playing, for example, a downward pick stroke or downward pick slant for 2 strings, and then changing your pick. And then you can go from a down pick slant to a flat to an up. Okay, so have a little play with all those different things. So you've got your wrist position, your wrist angle and how bent it is, your pick slant or being flat, and your grip in terms of how that affects the pick. And then hopefully you'll find something that feels really comfortable and that you can keep practicing with and make it part of your normal playing. I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, make sure you subscribe, like and share, and keep on picking. If you're looking for some really detailed explanation of picking dynamics, I strongly recommend check out Troy Grady. So he's got a really cool YouTube channel, but he's also got a website. So if you Google him, he's got hundreds of lessons on there on really detailed specifics on picking dynamics. So hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, make sure you give it a like, share it and subscribe. Thank you very much. Adios.